Hi, Paul.
Hi, Bob. How are you?
I'm okay. Let me introduce us. I'm Robert Wright, publisher of the Non-Zero newsletter. This is the Non-Zero podcast. You're Paul Bloom, world-famous psychologist and writer and publisher of the Small Potatoes newsletter. How you doing? Did I say that?
You did perfect.
Yeah.
Um, so we're talking on Monday afternoon,
Hmm.
and it's an important time, and lots have been happening. It's been 2 weeks since Canada Day,
That's,
and I
that was the thought at the foremost of my
figured
mind because there's not much going on in American politics. So I was thinking you could maybe do an update on Canadian politics.
a
So proceed.
province by province breakdown
I
of
think that's what
Canadian
America wants
controversies.
right now.
Every other podcast is hitting that topic, but there's other things we can talk about, I imagine.
Well, have you had any attempted assassinations in Canada?
This is Canada. I mean,
It's Canada, of course.
it would not be difficult to have an assassination in Canada because we have a gun deficit, not enough guns. So if somebody did have a gun, it would. Wasn't there in Sweden, in some Scandinavian country, the prime minister was just killed on the street by some guy?
Like just like today? Like,
No, a while ago.
oh man, it's all a blur.
Okay. Anyway, this is just misinformation.
Yeah.
Yes. So there was an assassination attempt on Donald Trump, which miraculously, literally miraculously, according to my people I read on Twitter, the bullet missed him by a fraction of an inch. And this will
Didn't miss
change.
him entirely. Got his
No,
got his
got his
ear, got
ear,
blood on his face.
and this will change American politics forever in some way, which you will explain.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, American politics has been drifting for some time now in a direction that has led me to increasingly suspect that we are living in a simulation. And this did it, right? I mean, if you saw this in a movie, right? Like you'd be like, oh, right. The guy shoots him from 150 yards, hits him in the ear,
Yeah.
doesn't hit his head. Sure. And then he, gets a little blood on his face. He stands up, raises a fist, iconic photo, photographer
Yeah.
perfectly positioned, American flag behind. Oh, and by the way, the New York Times picture actually captures the bullet, the speeding bullet. And by the way, I heard that guy, the photographer on the radio. If you're wondering, shutter speed was 1/8,000th of a second, but apparently that is the line of the bullet.
Yeah.
And I would just remind Red America that that's the liberal New York Times doing you a favor and helping to squash conspiracy theories that this was all a setup done by Trump and that was ketchup on his face or whatever. So the New York Times is corroborated. Actual bullet whizzing by his head. But really, seriously, this is crazy.
This is simulation stuff.
This is simulation level stuff. And then you got this 20-year-old guy who supposedly is a registered Republican. I guess it's safe.
Donated to a Democratic cause at one point, ejected from his gun club.
Well, he donated, interestingly. I mean, before we get into the psychology, he donated the money. I mean, first of all, if he was still a Republican at the time of the shooting, I think we can call him a never Trump Republican. Do you think that's going too far, Paul? Never Trump. He may have taken those words too seriously.
There we go.
But he donated the money in late January 2021, which was like a couple of weeks after the famed January 6th. So it's possible that the whole Trump reaction to the election culminating in January 6th, had a big psychological impact on him. Who knows? But you're a world famous psychologist. Did you want to go further into his psychology? Well, we know we have very little evidence, except that doesn't seem to have been super popular kid. I heard one report of bullying, but he wasn't totally friendless. He apparently didn't make the rifle team, is that I heard.
Yeah, I heard that.
Big setback. What do you think?
Well, it's not one of those obvious cases. Occasionally you come to these obvious cases where people have a strong history of radicalism on one side or another, and it's pretty clear that something like this was coming up. This is not such a case. This could be a case like the Las Vegas case, the biggest mass shooting in American history. I think he killed 60 people. And at least regarding what was made known to the public, nobody knows why. There's no answer to why. And there's a lot of these cases, a lot of the cases where prominent political figures are shot. Gabby Gifford, for instance, are done by people with mental illness of some sort or another and bears no resemblance to politics. Could be mental illness. It could be politically motivated in some way. We'll discover. It could be the sort of standard thing where he's a terribly bullied kid and wants to make a splash and show everybody. And if Biden was up there, he would have went to the rally and did it. I don't know. It's hard. It's hard to
Maybe.
figure out what the priors are, what the odds are.
I mean, it is, pretty often the case, not always, as you know, but pretty often the case with like mass shooters and so on. Things weren't going great for him socially. In many cases, hadn't gone great for him for some time. They had never found a place to fit. That's it's a cliche, but it's often the case. Sounds like some of that could apply to this kid. He was said to be smart, did well in school. But if I had to guess, I would guess that, he thought, I mean, he must have known there was a decent chance he'd die.
Yeah.
Must not have found living super appealing.
Yeah.
But I would guess he thought he would go down as a hero. He would certainly be remembered if he had, I mean, he'll be remembered anyway, but not like as long as he would be remembered if the bullet had gone an inch to the right. So I don't know. Speculation.
Maybe I'm getting old and soft, but I'm feeling bad I mean, obviously people were seriously injured. Somebody was killed. And feel bad for the kids' parents.
I do too.
It's just.
I mean, because, well, go ahead.
No, that's it. Well, just because I'm a parent, you're a parent.
Right. Once you're a parent, you know that if he had struggled socially, they were suffering vicariously through the whole thing.
Yeah.
That's the way parenthood is when it works right.
You're only as happy as your saddest child.
Whoa, did you think that up?
No, I stole it from somebody.
Huh. Well, that's good theft. It's good. And then this, I do feel sorry for them. Obviously feel sorry for the family of the guy who was killed and the other people who shot and so on. And I mean, kind of for America, this isn't good.
Yeah, this isn't good.
And yet what's most disturbing is that, leaving aside the bizarre details of the case, generically, it's not surprising that things took another step in the downward spiral toward violence, toward, intertribal violence in America.
This is either common or it's rare, depending on how you slice it. So I think Biden gave a list of political violence. Another one is Brett Kavanaugh. There was an assassination attempt by him. That's now going,
on him. Let's be clear.
On him. Sorry. That's right. You see, by the way, since Biden had become extremely conscious of my speeches, as well as yours, it's just, they happen a lot. We've just got to be more forgiving. Yes.
Although we didn't say what Biden said today. I'm going to read the quote.
Okay.
In America, this is about the Trump shooting. And I'm sorry, phonetically, folks, this is what he said. I heard it on NPR. I tracked it down. It's not what the White House transcript is going to read now, but he said, in America, we resolve our differences at the battle box. That's how we do it, at the battle box, not with bullets. Phonetically, that's what he said.
Well,
he meant ballot box.
There's a poetry to it, then, the battle box. It is kind of a battle box.
It's nice. Well,
anyway,
look, there is a profound commentary on our current politics, and maybe that's what he meant. Yeah, go ahead.
Anyway, so there's a history of this. This has happened a lot. Nancy Pelosi's husband being attacked by some lunatic with a hammer, that sort of stuff. On the other hand, a president or somebody like this at this level, I think the last one was Reagan, right?
Last president, and Trump is technically former president and candidate. But yeah, Reagan, who came, the bullet. Well, similar near miss, because it did hit him right in the body, but it was, I think, not far from his heart.
Yeah. And that was by somebody who was, trying to impress Jodie Foster. So.
Right. Same. Yeah. I mean, a more plainly mentally ill person, but kind of the same thing we're hypothesizing here.
So I have so many reactions. Not so much to the event itself, but by people's reaction to the event. One of which I'll make a theological point, which is many people on my Twitter stream, and I don't know, maybe this reflects badly on me, but we're showing pictures and everything saying that, how could you not believe in God? after this happened that God saved Donald Trump by averting the bullet by a fraction of an inch, which is a strange theological view because it implies that God could not have created a universe or altered a universe so that the shot didn't go off in the first place, or that some innocent guy didn't get killed. It
Yeah, the
suggests a sort of,
fireman who got killed seemed like a decent guy. I mean, why did
yeah,
God?
why did God take him out? And it sort of is a sort of a notion of a limited power God, like Satan guides the bullet, and then God could like step in and avert it at the last second. But it's a very bad theology.
But this
Now,
will be a thing among some of Trump's religious supporters for sure.
yes, and
That
it's a little bit what's guiding your simulation thing, which is so weird.
well, yeah,
So
actually, who am I to criticize them? It's the exact same argument. This is
yeah,
too weird not to, I mean, but I'm kind of kidding.
you're kind of
I
kidding.
don't think this is evidence that we're living in simulation, although um, things are getting weirder.
Well, unlike a true consistent theological belief where if God is omnipotent and omniscient and the like, he wouldn't have to do tricks like this. This simulation is just could be like a teenager in some other galaxy goofing around and saying, this will be fun.
Mhm.
This will really get them talking.
And it has.
And then the other thing, and maybe this deserves more time, but it's, you know, so we didn't talk about this, but Trump acted very extremely courageously after being shot. The great presence of mind, stood up, held up his fist, said, fight, fight. And the people are talking about that and saying, now he's definitely going to be president. And other people are saying, I was going to vote for Biden. Now I'm going to vote for Trump. And I think that speaks to something very primitive to us, where when we're assessing who to choose for a leader, we're not looking on qualities like, competence, similar morality, skills, and so on. We're looking for some sort of alpha top dog sort of thing. And a powerful demonstration like this hits people in a certain way. That I want that man to be my leader.
Hmm.
And I think that's incredibly human and incredibly unhealthy.
Yeah, I asked a question on Twitter last night. I asked for people to, since it obviously seemed to be the conventional wisdom that this made it more likely that Trump would win in November, I asked people to explain why. I mean, I had my own theory, but I was
Yeah.
curious. The overwhelmingly common answer was Trump strong, Biden weak. Weak. There are already
Yeah.
these memes. One of them, it juxtaposes two pictures: Trump versus Bullet, and that's Trump with his fist raised and blood on his face, and then the other one is Biden versus stairs,
Yeah.
and he's like sprawled out on the having fallen down.
Yeah.
I think that's not the only reason to think this may help Trump, and I should say in advance, I think both of the reasons, this one and the one I'm going to suggest, are reasons that make it more imperative to get rid of Biden on the Democratic ticket, because Biden, it is not impossible to come up with a Democratic candidate who seems more physically robust than Biden. I mean, that's not the only thing they're talking about. They're talking about courage and so on, but all that is, we can do better on that front. But the other thing is, I think, and I should say, we're mainly talking about, I think, mainly two categories of voters. Voters who were leaning toward Trump, but probably weren't going to bother to vote before. So it's a turnout question there. And maybe some who kind of like Trump, but were going to vote for RFK.
Yeah.
You can imagine that. And maybe a few who are leaning Biden. But I think it's the first two categories we're talking about. And I think another important dynamic is, it's common among Trump supporters to blame the Democrats for having so demonized Trump and called him a threat to democracy and a fascist and so on, as to encourage this kind of thing, which I don't doubt. I mean, I don't know what happened in this case, but I've always said that, rhetoric, extreme rhetoric, demonizing people as traitors or fascists or whatever. And that's come from both sides, I would say.
Yeah. I mean,
It does raise the chances of someone going over the edge. So I don't think that's crazy to say. And I would also say that Biden has done a certain amount of that. And that's the other reason that another Democratic candidate might be better. You want somebody like physically robust, looks pretty tough, has not done as much of the Trump, as a fascist, will be a dictator on day one or whatever. I don't know I mean, I have some words Biden has used here that I can that I can actually quote, but I don't know whether he's used those exact words, but I think both of those are reasons to replace Biden. And the betting markets aren't, his chances of being the nominee went up from, I think, somewhere maybe even slightly under 60% to slightly over 70% as a result of the assassination. I don't get it, but
well, maybe one track to that is for the next little while, a couple of weeks, nothing's going to happen politically to Democrats. It's the wrong time for Gavin Newsom to say, look, I've changed my mind. It's time to overturn.
It does buy Biden time, and running out the clock is his strategy. So that is true. On the other hand, I think if polls come out showing what I think they'll show, that this helped Trump in a few days, maybe there will be a reassessment. And just aside from the argument I just gave, it's like when it's a fourth quarter and you're way down, you just throw a Hail Mary. I mean, you just want to mix things up. You just want to try something. This ain't working.
I agree from the standpoint of the party as a whole, and actually the country as a whole. From the standpoint of individuals, it gets more complicated, where it could be that Trump's reaches such a level of popularity that nobody wants to stick their head and then lose. They'll just sit it out and do this again 4 years.
Oh, I'm available. I'm available. Look,
I didn't literally mean nobody.
I mean, it's a good career move for so many Democrats, even if they lose by a fair amount. It turns you into a national figure forever.
Yeah.
And again, I am available.
Do you really want to be president?
I don't think I'm really cut out for that. But I'd be better at a debate than Joe Biden. I want to boldly make that claim.
You'd be good at debate, but I don't know. You'd have to give up the podcast.
Oh yeah, that's a pretty steep price to pay for being the most powerful person in the world. You're right.
It's like The Apprentice. What The Apprentice was to Trump, the podcast would be to you. Were you
right? No, I'm sorry. I've got my priorities straight.
So yeah. Sorry. Go on. I don't know.
No.
The picture of him and the blood and everything, it is very powerful, but in some sense, it's not like the problem with Trump is that people think he's physically cowardly and non-aggressive and everything. This is a very Trump thing to do. It's his brand. It's sort of unsurprising. If Biden did something like that, that'd be a game changer. Because, wow, I didn't know Biden had it in it. For Trump to do a game changer, you'd have to go a period of time without lying or slandering somebody or some sort of felony or go a period where he doesn't promise to overthrow the country. That'd be a twist. But the physical courage, that's Trump's brand. And I'm saying that as a guy who really hates Trump. But yeah.
If he had done a peace sign instead of a fist bump?
Well, so this is news that may be incredibly out of date, even when our podcast comes out. But apparently, this has been reported in the New York Times. Trump has had a change of heart as a result of the assassination attempt.
Change of strategy, I'd say, but go ahead.
Well, he has decided he has torn up his speech, which was going to attack Biden, and give a speech focused on unity. Now, I do not believe this, but it would be a really nice example for the simulation if, as a result of this failed assassination attempt, Trump becomes like super woke and peaceful and sort of mellow.
I don't think those will happen.
Not aggressive. I can see that.
It does make political sense for him to moderate his message, for sure. I think this is just smart politics.
But this is the one thing Trump is not capable of. Over and over again, he's like ahead, and if only he would shut up, it would do well. And then he does not find it easy to tone himself down.
I think, I don't know. I mean, it will have its strident moments, the speech, but I don't doubt that he's going to tone it down. You know what's funny is Steve Bannon says, I believe he says it in that Errol Morris documentary, but I'm not sure. But by Bannon's account, after Trump won the election in 2016, Bannon was like, right after the election, hours after Bannon was like, okay, pedal to the metal. Let's transform America. Let's push our agenda. And Trump was like, no, I want to send a message of unity and healing.
Yeah.
And then Trump leaves his, I guess, penthouse at Trump Tower and there's all these people shaking their fists at him and calling him a fascist. And according to Bannon, that turned Trump around. I don't know. Do we trust Steve Bannon? He's a fun. I don't know, but
So we should be, if we're nicer to Trump, he'll be nicer to us. Could be.
I don't know. I mean, look, he's always been irresponsible, and
I
but
mean, one thing about Trump, which is his saving grace, is he's a man with maybe an exception of immigration, with no agenda at all, outside of some combination of self-interest, a desire to be surprising, and to humiliate his enemies, so it's not like my worry is if he becomes president again, is his authoritarian nature will cause him to throw his enemies in prison and destroy the country. But it's not like I'm worried he's going to set up this reform and that reform and this thing and that thing that I don't like.
Well, it's funny. Mickey Kaus used to argue that he had more in the way of heartfelt ideology than was appreciated. I mean, my view was your view. Mickey says you can go way back and not find not just sentiments about immigration of the kind you'd expect, but about foreign policy to some extent. In any event, he's now, he will be surrounded by a certain group of people, and I think there will be a more coherently prosecuted ideology because he's learned things. And this time he's got the team ready. Last time, I don't think he even thought he'd win the election. So they'll know what they're doing more if he becomes president. And I think there are a few question marks, like on foreign policy. How hawkish will he be on China? I think that's still up for grabs, depending on who the advisors are. But, broadly speaking, in some other realms, certainly including immigration, I think it's pretty much set.
Immigration as a policy. For foreign policy, it's just isolationism.
Well, that's always, no. I mean, first of all, that's always a misnomer if you mean total lack of engagement. So-called isolationists usually like economic engagement. Often they like more of it than others.
A relative lack of military engagement around the world.
A relative lack of military engagement, but unilateral military engagement, for example, against Iran, is at least as likely with Trump, I would say. He's not an across the board restrainer in the military. No. And when it comes to Iran, he's at least as likely as Biden to get us into war. And China, some of the advisors they're talking about are real China hawks. And of course, Trump's longstanding message about middle American workers having been exploited by China sets him up to be, first of all, very pro-tariff, although Biden has been too, but also to be antagonistic toward China more broadly. Who knows? The whole, let me tell you this tweet I did Saturday night, that is about the whole psychology of tribalism. Here was my tweet. It was just, hours after the assassination. Why don't we just skip the argument about which side has used more extreme rhetoric about the other side, which side used it first, etc. There's been way too much on both sides. If you agree, maybe the best thing to do is politely discourage people on your own side from using it, meaning the extreme rhetoric. Got a lot of action, actually, in terms of retweets and likes, but it also got a lot of accusations of both sidesism, and it got them from both sides, which
there we go.
Isn't. And it made me, of course, pro-Trumpers were saying, oh, come on, we haven't said anything like what Biden and others have said about Trump. And you got kind of the same thing from the other side. Does there seem to be an asymmetry to you just viewing this from the column of Canada?
Yeah, I actually think so I'm going to say maybe it's opposite of what you believe, but I think Trump's rhetoric continually tends to be far more extreme than either Biden's or prominent Democrats. there's a couple of thoughts here, but in every speech, he's threatening to throw his opponents in prison. The chant "lock her up" is a Trump invention. Trump's, I think there's some phrase like "final days." There's apocalyptic language throughout. I think, Biden, and in fact, maybe it's Biden's age which makes me less sort of struck by the rhetoric. Like it's kind of cute, but I think Trump's worse.
Yeah,
If you put it into an algorithm and you gave two speeches of one, the speeches of Biden, and you just said, "Hey, algorithm, we're not going to, which one's more extreme?" Maybe Trump.
yeah, it's I mean, I started thinking about this afterwards because, the argument from the right is that Democrats, by painting him as such an enemy of democracy, a fascist dictator in the making, even, I mean, the New Republic put him on the cover as Hitler
Yes,
just within
yes.
the last couple of weeks. I mean, come on. Yeah, well, before I trash the New Republic more, let me say it is a difficult thing because certainly since January 6th, since that whole phase where he tried to overturn the election,
Yeah.
and look, there's no doubt that it was dishonest and corrupt. I mean, we've got him on tape talking to the guy in charge of counting the votes in Georgia saying, "I just need you to find me X thousand votes." Okay. Couldn't be balder. He and his surrogates promulgated various egregious falsehoods that were at a minimum easy to check if they really wanted to check them. And I think in some cases they certainly knew they weren't true. And then on January 6th, I'm not saying he instigated the takeover itself, but he sure kind of set the ground. And moreover, after they were already in the Capitol and chanting things like "hang Mike Pence," and he was watching the whole thing on TV, he tweeted something to the effect that Mike Pence is a traitor. I forget the exact words. So, obviously trying to rev things up further. And remember, it wasn't just like guys in the Capitol. They were trying to disrupt the confirming of the elected American president. I mean, I don't like to use the word sacred very often, but especially in context of politics. But if there's a sacred ritual in American politics, and in any event, one that you should be prosecuted if you try to disrupt, it is the confirm, the confirming of who the lawfully elected president is. That's the process he was trying to disrupt. So that's the challenge. It's true. It's not crazy to think of him as an enemy of democracy. Now, that
Right.
said, Hitler, come on, give me a break. I mean, the reason we revile Hitler is not because he was a fascist, which is what the piece was about. If you want to compare, if you want to call Trump a fascist, do Mussolini.
Yeah.
The reason
Yeah.
we revile Hitler is because he killed 6 million Jews and some
Yeah.
other stuff, but it wasn't the fascism per se.
I heard John Goldberg talk about a Hitler comparison. He says he never makes. He said Hitler would have gotten rid of Obamacare. I mean, it's just Hitler would have got things done, like bad things, but he would have got things done, and Trump not as efficacious. But look, so this is what I'm wanting. It's a tension between what you just said, which is we should lower down the rhetoric, and what you just said,
Mhm.
of which I agree with every word of it. But are you saying that politicians shouldn't say Trump is a danger to democracy? He is an authoritarian. If he takes power, he may not give it up. He may imprison his enemies. These are true things.
Some of them are. I think a couple of things. First of all, let me read you some stuff Biden said in 2022, and this is after January 6th. What bothers me about this really is less the demonizing of Trump than drawing so-called MAGA Republicans into the indictment, which I take to mean everyone who voted for him. And Biden says, quote, "MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic." Quote, "MAGA Republicans do not respect the Constitution. They do not believe in the rule of law. MAGA forces are a threat to our personal rights and pursuit of justice, blah, blah, blah. They're determined to blah, blah, blah. They embrace anger. They thrive on chaos." I mean, I just think it's irresponsible for any president to generalize about all the voters on the other side like that. And I just think Biden has been pretty irresponsible. But there's also
Maybe.
there's also, again, I grant it's challenging because Trump is spooky. He was spooky coming in to me. He's a lot spookier after January 6th. It is not crazy to say that, to see him as a threat to democracy. I don't think that's crazy. But I think precisely because, like, it's not crazy and America is in peril, we should calibrate the rhetoric pretty carefully so that we don't, like, irresponsibly exacerbate, the positive feedback system between the two tribal hatreds. So there's one other thing that's been going on for a long time, which is just, I think, because Trump so freaked everybody out beginning in 2016, the media and various people were kind of irresponsible in the conclusions they jumped to about him and so on. I think Russiagate is kind of an example.
Yep.
In the end, look, they did as thorough an investigation as you could do. No smoking gun. But the other thing is, the find people on both sides issue. This is a huge thing with Trump supporters. It's called the Charlottesville lie. They call it that. And I want to read you from a piece I wrote about it in 2021, trying to straighten it out if I can find it. Okay, here it is. He said there were fine people on both sides. This is, of course, there was the issue was taking down a statue of Robert E. Lee. And first of all, let me say, I can imagine a Southerner opposing that without being a racist. Call me evil. I think that's possible. There were some of those, but there were obviously bad people there. There were white nationalists. There were neo-Nazis. Trump said there were, quote, fine people on both sides. Then he added, I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and white nationalists because they should be condemned totally. Now, here's the lead paragraph of the New York Times editorial about all this, okay? Trump says, I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and white nationalists. They should be condemned totally. New York Times writes, given one more chance to forcefully condemn the neo-Nazis and white supremacists whose rally in Charlottesville ended in violence and a counter-protester's death, Mr. Trump angrily insisted, as he had suggested on Saturday, that both sides were equally to blame. And they never go on to quote what he said by way of qualifying his initial remarks. I do think there's been a lot of that that's helped turn up the temperature.
Yeah. Even in the debate itself, they went back and forth about that, Biden and Trump. And I hate to say this, but Trump was right. And Biden was wrong. And Biden's no dummy. He knows he's lying. He just knows it's the good lie.
I think you're giving him a lot more cognitive credit than he deserves at this point, but go ahead.
So there's been stuff, Trump has been accused of stuff which he did not actually do. But he's been called a rapist. And then court, the legal judgment comes in, he kind of was a rapist. He's been called long before, and in January 6th, people said he was fundamentally undemocratic and would not accept the results of an election. And that turned out to be true. There are a lot of really bad things about Trump which are true. And this leads to sort of an uncomfortable question, which is there seems to be a tension when people say, well, I'll put it this way. You could understand somebody believing that Trump is an existential threat to the nation, deciding that assassinating him is a good idea. And maybe that goes to the punchline of what you're saying, which is you shouldn't say such things.
Yeah, it's so you're saying should you sometimes not say true things because they'll pour fuel on the fire?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
Well, most of us live our lives under that assumption. There are things at a dinner party that you don't say.
Yes.
And I suppose, yeah, I can, but again, I can imagine making that judgment myself, sure. But I don't, when I did that tweet saying there's guilt on both sides in terms of extreme rhetoric, I don't mean to talk about things people say that are true or after careful consideration plausible, like he's an enemy of democracy.
Yeah.
At the same time, I guess I would say that somebody in Biden's position should be very, very careful with the language. And here's another little example of that involves the White House, and I think including Biden, is Trump's dictator on day one thing. Now, look, Trump basically deserves a blame for this because he's fucking trolling us. But, Sean Hannity asked him, so you would never abuse power as retribution against anybody? And he says, except for day one. Yeah. And Hannity says, except for day one, meaning? And he says, well, I want to close the border and I want to drill. Hannity says, that's not retribution. And then Trump says, oh, we love this guy, meaning Hannity. He says of Hannity, he says, you're not going to be a dictator, are you? I say, no, other than day one. So, and then he talked more about closing the border, drilling for oil, and then he says, after that, I'm not a dictator. And, the White House, I think that day, the campaign manager says, tonight Trump said he will be a dictator on day one. A little bit of an oversimplification, but yeah, look, I don't know.
One factor has to play in this is that Trump has a huge role as a comic. He's funny. He trolls.
He can be.
He mocks. Some of it's cruel. It's never self-deprecating, but some of it is actually funny. You hear his rallies, and he's on about Hannibal Lecter and would he rather get eaten by a shark or electrocuted? A long riff on that. He's very interested in sharks. It's a very big concern about.
He has a shark thing.
Like,
yes,
this would be a terror, monstrous assassination attempt if it involved a shark. But he just riffs and makes jokes all the time. There was a 60 Minutes thing. I'm fascinated. 60 Minutes. Leslie Stahl is interviewing him and says, some people say you are not a very humble man, and immediately Trump says, I am the most humble man you will ever meet. Just this sort of thing. He did. This is before, as he was running for his first office, somebody's doing a word association thing. Let me name people, and you tell me what you think of them. And the person says, George Bush, the president at the time. And, no, it wasn't George Bush from the past, and the younger George Bush. And, you think Trump would say, a Republican, Trump's first answer is low IQ. And it's
wait, that was an answer to what question?
It was an answer to what do you think of when I say George Bush? Okay. And Trump's response, low IQ. And Trump is an insult comic. He trolls. He does that. And so I think a lot of people with this style are very dangerous as part of his demagogue appeal. But but at times you cannot take what he says that seriously.
That probably helps him.
Yes.
With some supporters who are on the margins, who otherwise might be skeptical of some of the things he says, he does. And when we go into overtime, and by the way, I'm about to add something. But when we go into overtime, I'll ask you a question you probably wouldn't want to answer in public, or might not. Is like, did you think it was funny when Trump called Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas?
Discuss that in overtime.
What?
We'll discuss that in overtime.
We'll discuss that in overtime.
We also should discuss the plot of the movie The Dead Zone, which is based on a novel by Stephen King. Okay. Christopher Walken, Martin. I'll set it up for you. Okay. It's our main character, Christopher Walken. I forget what happens to him, but he develops psychic powers. He sees the future, and when he touches somebody, he sees their future. So, presidential campaign, Martin Sheen is running. He touches his hand. All of a sudden, he sees the future. The future is this guy destroys the world. Launches nuclear and destroys the world. And then he walk away, and then that's it. And so Christopher Walken realizes, I have to kill him. I have to stop this from coming true. And it's your only mainstream movie which is pro-assassination, because we see it from his view. He's right. And it ends in an interesting twist, which is the opposite of Trump. I forget exactly how he does it, but he gets a gun and is going to shoot Martin Sheen. And he misses, he fails. But Martin Sheen grabs a baby and holds the baby up to shield himself from the bullets, which gets captured on film and destroys his political career, averting the end of the world.
Well, I mean, this last case or this weekend is certainly a case study in unintended consequences.
It is unintended consequences.
Um,
The opposite.
the opposite. Uh, and by the way, as Andrew Day, my sometimes conversation partner, pointed out, this thing where Biden said the battle box and meant the ballot box. Speaking of opposites, was another. I had noted that the two screw ups. Vice President Trump referring to Kamala, President Putin referring to Zelensky, were both kind of opposites. Actually,
Yeah.
those of a very specifically parallel sort. But this ballot box, battle box is another kind of opposites conflation. And I mean, like, what would it take for Democrats to go like, it's just going to be a shit show from here to November if this guy's the candidate?
So
But
I agree. I agree as a matter of political fact. But let me push something, which I was going to talk about before the Trump thing came out, which is we judge our presidents in the wrong way. Suppose Biden had Parkinson's, and some people say he does, but suppose he had it. But I know people with Parkinson's, and it doesn't always cause cognitive deficits. You can check for it. But suppose he was slow to speak, made errors, some problems. But suppose he also made good, wise decisions and good policies and smart guy. Why do we care so much about the fluidity, the speed, the manliness? And it often is gendered manliness. Why do we care so much? For instance, if when you have somebody running for president says, "I'm not going to do debates because I'm not so good at debates." The rat-a-tat, the fancy lines and everything. I'm a good leader. I'm not a good debater. They're incredibly different skills, but we conflate them.
yeah, I mean, well, first of all, if you're arguing to kick Biden off the ticket, it's not because you think that's the way we should look at presidents. It's because you know that's the way presidents are looked at. It's just a tactical move.
Right. So politically, you're right. The world as it is, you're right. But I'm saying the world as it is doing things the wrong way. I think debates are stupid. Debates are one step ahead of having them, do a Brazilian jiu-jitsu battle on stage. It doesn't, because how good you are at a debate represents a very different skill set than whether you're right.
I think it depends on how you set them up. And I think the format of this last one was better, at least in the sense that the silencing of the mics turns it into less of a playground brawl.
Yes.
But I think in Biden's case, no, I think there's good reason to doubt that he probably doesn't have everything you'd want a president to have right now. And he's very unlikely to have it in 2 years. But that's another
I accept
argument.
that, but I'm just making a broader point, which is so much of what goes into how we choose a president involves combative verbal skills, verbal fluidity, physical robustness, and everything. And it's all bullshit. It doesn't matter. Somebody could be a wonderful president, be fairly self-effacing, not quick on their feet, not big and strong. It is our primate. We are. It shows how we are not so much removed from monkeys.
Of course, you're Canadian. I mean,
it's true.
If the Canadian approach is so great, how come you guys haven't killed hundreds of thousands of innocent people over the last couple of decades, huh?
It's the first time I've asked that question. Justin Trudeau is fairly heterosexual. Do they use that term anymore? He's not. He would not make for a good American leader. But I just think, look, you've done your share of debates, and I know you are good at that. But I guess I feel that I could be debating a Holocaust denier. He'd probably wipe the floor with me because they have all these things which I can't fact check, and they have these stories, and they're very, what about this? What about this? What about this? Making up shit all the time. And I've seen debates being won by people who had none of the facts on their side, but just rhetoric and speed and humor. It's a bad way to decide a president.
Not the best. I mean, again, I think a properly structured debate can be useful, but so I guess, I mean, there's more we could say about this, and maybe we will when we go into overtime. Speaking of overtime, I taped this conversation with Nick Bostrom, famous philosopher of the future, and I mean, speaking of simulation argument, I did ask him about that, by the way, and I did the spiel. Okay, now we're going to overtime. if you're a paid subscriber on your newsletter, and I said, okay, now we're in overtime. And he said, so now am I in what they call the parrot room?
There we go. You see,
Yeah,
that's
we're famous. Turns out he had never been in the parrot room, even as a spectator, because he had never been paid up, but he knew about it.
You knew about the parrot room. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought his book Deep Utopia is wonderful. So
We
I
can
hope
maybe
you
talk
talked
about
it.
that in overtime. Now, the thing about you being here is that people could get access to overtime by becoming a paid subscriber to the Small Potatoes newsletter. Or do you have a different name, a more euphemistic name for them, like members? We're called. I've been instructed to call them members, and then apparently they don't realize if you call them members, they don't realize that when they give you the credit card information, they're actually giving you money. Somehow it's like this magical thing where if you call them members, they go, "Oh, sure."
Maybe I could call them like taters or something. I don't know.
Tater heads. Tater heads. Like, did you ever have Mr. Potato Head when you were around, Paul?
I did. Even in
you
Canada,
should pull
we
that
had
out
Mr.
for the
Potato
newsletter's
Head.
sake. That should be the newsletter's mascot, and it should look like you.
That should not. I got a potato
Just a
like
thought.
look to me. I could pull that off.
Just a thought.
I did something very unusual. I released my Substacks on Mondays, and today I had one on loyalty, which you and I discussed a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I made this paid only. I did a sort of
whoa.
I need the money, Bob. I just kind of gotta need the money. So
Yeah,
I'm just gonna.
we're not allowed to compete on that level, Paul. We can't tell our little sob stories when people are deciding whether to access overtime via the non-zero newsletter or Small Potatoes. We can't get into this arms race of patheticness. Okay.
Yeah, but you have so many subscribers, and I have so few.
Oh, but my life is so hard in so many other ways, Paul.
That's true.
Have I told you about this? I'll tell you in overtime.
Tell me in overtime.
If they want to see the pathos arms race. Okay, so
we have so much more to talk about, though. Okay, could we do one more thing before overtime?
Maybe, but they're dropping like flies. Have you ever seen the YouTube stats on engagement? Only goes in one direction, buddy. I
guess so. Like, no, you're not going to add people now.
No, nobody's showing up now.
Do you think the election is effectively over?
No.
No, exactly right. Right answer. This is more.
There's a dark joke I'm not going to make, but no, for other reasons as well.
My theme, for the parrot room, but the theme of this is people are morons. So everybody sees this and they say, "Oh my God, I'm so excited by this assassination. I'm feeling so rushed towards Trump. It's over now." Not realizing that things will happen in the next few months. Trump might rape somebody else. We may not be happy with his VP candidate. Sorry, is it too soon to say nasty things about Trump? It's never too soon.
Never too soon.
Okay. Anyway, so I'm just saying the election is not over by a long shot.
No, I mean, plus, look, I assume there'll be a bump in the polls. Bumps in the polls tend to dissipate a little. In fact, that's what happened after the debate, which is one reason Biden's still in it, is because there was some narrowing after the initial bump. And if the Democrats get a new candidate, I think, depending on who it is, it could be kind of a new ballgame. That'll create a huge amount of attention and excitement, and we'll see. But no, do not give up, folks.
Yeah. President Cory Booker is just
good example, probably, of somebody who combines, robustness. Played football in college. Did Donald Trump play football in college? No. Played football in college, and I would suspect has not been that extreme with the anti-Trump rhetoric, I would guess.
No,
I don't know.
No, he's actually his style is moderate and reasoned, and he's
I mean that's the other thing. To put that argument more positively, I think there's a place for a candidate of national healing more after the assassination attempt than before. That's why Trump's going to cast himself as one. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, you're right. I mean, you think about it. I think, for the most part, Obama was very moderate in his rhetoric, and unless my memory may fail me, but Ronald Reagan was too. Ronald Reagan was hated by a lot of people, but he did come off as this genial old guy. Yeah,
well, of course they didn't. Actually, I have a reply. I have a counter to the Obama thing, kind of. We'll save that for overtime. What else will we talk about in overtime? A bunch of stuff.
You're still not watching Presumed Innocent. or House of the Dragon.
No, I do. You can talk about those. There's a movie you saw some of, I saw more of, all of that we can talk about. It's a time travel movie.
Yeah.
I think we should watch, now that we both think we're living in a simulation. I think for future reference, we should, it would be rewatching it for me, maybe for you, The Truman Show.
Oh yeah, I would definitely a rewatch for me, but
Let's do
I'd
a
be willing to
rewatch
do
and
it.
then talk about that down the road.
Yeah.
Uh, but we never have a shortage of stuff to talk about. We can talk a little more about, well, Trump Biden, I'm afraid.
You could say your joke, which you didn't want to say here.
I could. And I want to say something about the COVID debate between lab leak and natural origins.
Okay.
News on that front. Okay. And so you guys know what you have to do if you want to follow us into overtime, where things get, if anything, better, I would say, Paul, right?
Much
We
better.
save our
Much
best
better.
stuff.
This is
Yeah.
like this is if this is a 7
I
overtime, it's
feel
like a 10.
guilty subjecting people to this compared to what we subject them to in this.
It's like an airport. So airports apparently suck really badly, partially on purpose. So people go to the lounges, which seem much better in
Ah,
contrast. The
yeah.
overtime is like the first class lounge.
This is yeah. It, and this is the airport. We're in the
This
airport
is
now. No
we're
wonder it's
sitting by the
unpleasant,
gate.
folks.
You can't get any seats. There's no plugs that
Yeah,
work.
yeah,
Someone's having a panic attack next to you. But soon we're going to be in a lounge where there's like a
yeah.
nice buffet table, good chair. There you go.
Your flight has been delayed, but if you step into overtime, alcohol is
Free
available.
free drinks.
Okay.
Okay.
So thanks to everybody. Hope to see you there.